Good morning. Today has been an interesting day. I had planned to start this video about an hour ago, and instead I was drawn into a talk called Women in Systems Thinking. And I am so glad I went, I have to tell you. It is really wonderful, and hopefully we will be experiencing more of Mulaney Goodchild and her relational systems thinking, where she actually pulls together systems thinking, a very Western concept, with indigenous wisdom and how they talk and speak. So it was a wonderful, wonderful seminar, and I hope to be able to share it with you a little bit later. So I had promised that today I would talk about the cards. So I've created a card deck based on the values that Mother Earth uses. So it's a chance to explore them more deeply. It's a chance to remember them because there are a lot. There's 15 values. Actually, there are 16 values and 4 intents is what there are. And that's 20 some odd things, you know. Our little minds hold 2 or 3 maybe on a good day. So 20 is quite a bit. So the card deck is a way of remembering and of refreshing and of more deeply considering how the earth actually works and how that makes a difference in our lives when we pay attention to that. The journey that I'm on, the crusade that I'm in, the flag that I'm waving has to do with reconnecting with nature. And what exactly does that mean? I mean, you can go out and sit in a meadow, and that doesn't change your life a whole lot as a rule. It may make you feel better, and that's a good thing. But it doesn't really inform your life in a real concrete way. It should, but it doesn't. So what do we do? Where do we go from here, given where we are? And so it's learning to listen to Earth. It's learning to shift our daily practices to those things that more closely connect us to Earth, like gardening. It is not prosaic, it is critical. Learning to hear, to discern how we are separated, and the language constructs and the ways of talking we have that really are separative as opposed to connected. I was also listening today to a presentation from a bunch of guys who are very interested in the paranormal. And they're real excited about creating machines, doing research to prove that the paranormal exists. And I discovered I had an incredible amount of unease about the conversation. For one, it was they were grasping at something outside of themselves that they wanted to be able to shape and mold and use. And that's a separatist approach. The other horrifying thought is that we are all connected. And if they ever got that, they could then manipulate that space as well, because they're not in it. They're not sensitive to being connected in that way. They would see it as something outside themselves they've touched into instead of something inside themselves they've touched into. And that is a scary thought for me. Anyway, so those are my ruminations for the day. But I do want to take a minute to talk a little bit about the deck. I will show it. I'm going to do a screen share and show you what the cards look like. They will be in a program called Deckable. And I'm hoping to do a demo, which I may attach to this video or do another video with, so you can actually see how the application works. It's all digital. Anybody can access it. You can buy the cards. So they're yours, and you can do things with them. You can share them. You can journal on them, with them. There's a place to journal in the app. You can shuffle. You can combine them with other card decks. The app has over 300 different decks of all different persuasions, so you can find something for anything. And certainly there are things that are going to be compatible or related in some way, and I think that's fantastic. So it will give us a way to see different insights in new ways. That said, let me share the screen. So that is what this will look like. Not sure what you're seeing, and I'm afraid that what you're seeing has to do with other things that I don't want you to see. Well, I've just confused everything, haven't I? So there's that. There's that. So these are the cards. And there's a card to talk a little bit about what living regeneratively means, a card to talk about cards. And this is the first intent. So the intents are all colored. They all have a different color. And that I think is helpful. And then there are 4 values connected to each intent, and they are the same color as the intent that they're with. So this intent is Earth's intent to keep life going. And I've just written an article on intents. So I would encourage you to go to my blog or go to the network or to LinkedIn or Medium and look at the article if you want to have a deeper understanding of intents. Like everything we talked about, it's artificial in a way. How do you describe or see the intent to life? It is, to all intents and purposes, invisible. Values are invisible. We can't see them, but we certainly experience, and we can certainly discern the intents from behaviors. We do that with people all the time. We do it with animals as well. We're not so cool about plants. We don't spend enough time with them to be able to see their intents. When you get fast forward or speeded up versions of plant growth, you can see the intent. It's very clear. It's very clear. But normally it's so slow that it misses our conscious awareness. And certainly life, I mean, it's all around us, but you can't touch or feel life. It's just something we experience, something we are even. But what is it has been a very difficult process for scientists to try and define in a way that makes sense for them and that is all encompassing. So I'm not going to try and do that. I'm going to say that life exists. For me, life has become love. The two are synonymous. In my view, you cannot experience love without life, and you don't want to experience life without love. Love is how life continues. So when we're not expressing or feeling or paying attention to the love in our life and our expression of it, we are not supporting life's continued existence. Unfortunately, we have lots of habits in that category. So there is a commitment expressed through the existence of the planet and through our personal existence and through the increasing complexity of life on the planet for life to continue and thrive. That's the commitment. So these cards talk about how you can think about your own commitment. You can be committed to all sorts of different things. And what does that look like? What does that commitment look like for you? So these are cards to reflect on. And create a new card. I'm committed to what? And what does that look like for you? This is the first value. All actions create the conditions that support life. And this is the prime directive. This is the only thing we need to do to be moral and ethical beings on this planet. If we always do that, we will be moral and ethical beings. Because we don't do that, in my view, we don't feel good about ourselves as a species, nor do we trust ourselves as a species. Whenever we see actions, thoughts, ways of being that don't create the conditions that support life continuing, it hurts us somewhere inside because it's really anti-us. We want to continue. Yes, we're part of life. That is our drive. And yet we do things that make it impossible. The pollution is such a great example. Why would a life-seeking being destroy the air and water that it lives on? Can you answer that question for me? I have no idea why we would do that. It makes no sense at all. And not only do we do that, we fight cleaning it up. We resist preventing that from happening. What? What? So these are 3 cards that talk about how we can take action that creates the conditions that support life. And you can reflect on how your life is an expression of these ideas. You can add in your journal what other actions you can take to support that. And all of these actions are done with the next value, which is integrity of the whole. It is done not for my survival, but my survival in the system in which I am living, full of other life beings. So I have to maintain the integrity of the whole. I have to help all other life beings live so that I can live. That's the difference between being human-centric and life-centric. We're human-centric. We want to live. And we think that as it gets hotter, we're going to live in air-conditioned buildings. Not going to happen, folks. And we have a very narrow range tolerance for temperature. We don't live really well outside, and we don't live really well out there either. We want it right here in a kind of a narrow range. And we're going to exceed that range very shortly. So what are we going to do? We are already changing our body temperature. You might go take yours and just see if you're 98.6 or 97.6. A lot of folks have been changing their temperature. As we try and maintain the integrity of the whole, we have to fit. We have to be in sync with everything else. So these are things you can do, things you can think about to begin to be conscious of how we manage the integrity of the whole and how that has to take precedence over our very tiny selves. And that speaks to right relationship, because when you do that, you are in right relationship with everything else. So this is another signpost, linchpin, way to look at your life, your experience, your relationships. Are you in right relationship? And these are 3 cards that think about what it means to be in right relationship. And then you are encouraged to think about your life and your relationships to see if that is true of them. And if not, to take um, action to change it. This is another one. We don't think about this because we don't see ourselves as part of life. We don't see ourselves as necessary to life. But we are in some way. And there are lots of ways, in fact, in which the human species is unique. And it's not about tools. And it's not about AI. We are the only species, for instance, as far as we know, that understands the whole. So if we can see the whole, what value is it? I go back to maintaining the integrity of the whole. We can be conscious on that. That's an incredible responsibility. So here are 3 cards to talk about how humans are intrinsic to life and what that could possibly mean. And of course, it can mean lots of things. So you're not limited to these. These are stepping stones to think more deeply on the topic. And then we come to the second intent, which is continuity. Continuity is the intent of life to stay here, to keep going. And what does it need to do? And part of keeping on has to do with maintenance, taking care of self and others. So when things wear out or break, they're fixed. But there's more to it than that. And what can we learn from the planet about continuity? She has definitely got a lot of experience in this area. So here are 4 cards to think more deeply about continuity, continuing, what it takes to keep things going. And continuity is the only thing that acknowledges a past, a present, and a future. Everything is now. And so one of the first values is feature first. The future has to be considered. You can't do things to rob the future, to undermine the future, to destroy the potential in the future. Again, if all actions create the conditions that support life, the future is inherent in those actions. But we as humans get to think about the future. And so here are 3 cards to think more deeply about how we take the future into our own actions and understandings. And then interdependency. Being interdependent is another way that nature makes sure that things continue. You don't have to do it by yourself. You have help and support, and you have to offer help and support. It's a 2-way street, and we'll talk about that later. So understanding that interdependency, strengthening that interdependency is one way that we can ensure continuity. And here are 3 cards to help you think more deeply about that. And interdependency goes hand in hand with reciprocity. Because you have to receive help, you also give it. You have to do both. You can't deny help because that is shredding the system. That is severing a connection that needs to be made. So we need to receive help and we need to offer it. And I like those words better than give and take. We receive and we offer. When we offer, receiving is acknowledging and honoring that offer. When we offer, it is acknowledging and honoring the receiver. we don't have enough reference in our life. So here are 3 cards to think more deeply about reciprocity. 0 waste. You know, the interesting thing about the planet is it's a closed system. There's nothing coming to the planet. We are here. This is it. We don't get payloads of stuff from someplace else. Everything we make from what is here, with one exception, and that's energy. The energy comes from the sun. That's the only thing that is outside of this living system that feeds it. We're not really good at this at all. And so understanding the necessity to waste nothing does not mean that you don't throw away. It means that you make it available to something else. That's a very big difference. It is not out of our sphere, it is into another sphere. And we don't think about that. So here are 3 cards to think more deeply about 0 waste. And that brings us to resilience, which is the 3rd intent, to bounce back, to be able to withstand stress and shock without losing form and shape. But that doesn't mean we look exactly the same, but it does mean we have maintained our identity in responding to the changes. That is a hugely deep statement that I'm going to let you think about and unpack, and we could talk about more deeply in another time. But resilience is about dancing with what happens on a continuous basis. We like to stop things. We like to hang on to things. We want sameness and similarity and familiarity. You know, we want things that don't ever change. That is not how nature works. Nature is constantly changing. And that constant changing is one of the capacities of resilience, to be flexible, to shift, to dance with, to change as needed, and to practice that on a daily basis. So here are 4 cards to think about resilience and to discover how to live it, to make it a habitual practice of our own. And then the values. So self-organization. Oh, this is probably one of my favorite things right now. I am luxuriating in the fact that we create our own world. I am luxuriating in that understanding. Autopoiesis, self-making. That's what all life does. Every little piece of life is constantly making itself. And that is a thrill. And so here are 3 cards to think more deeply about self-organization or self-making. Self-organization is actually a little different than self-making, but self-making is really what I'm talking about. Maybe we'll change that later. And then diversity. We're talking resilience here. You can't be resilient without difference. Difference is so key because you have no idea what you're going to meet up with. And having a lot of similar things allows you that flexibility. So think about that in your own life. How diverse is your understanding of the world? How many options do you provide for yourself? Because we're meaning-making systems. If you only have one way of understanding, you are sorely limited. And if that is tested, you either have to give it up or break. Neither one is very comfortable. So having lots of different understandings is really helpful. So here are 3 cards for you to think more deeply about diversity and how it shows up in your life or it doesn't. Dynamic stability. This is a lovely one because it's so unfamiliar to us. I was talking earlier in terms of diversity and rigidity. You know, resilience is the opposite of rigidity. And dynamic stability is the opposite of rigidity also. So it's pictorially the difference between a meandering river and one that has been put into cement by the US Army Corps of Engineers. So the cement one is stable. We know exactly where it's going to be most of the time. If we made it big enough, it'll be there. And the water will rush through as fast as it can go. So what's the purpose of a river? It's not to carry water from one point to another. It's to provide water from one point to another. And it does that by meandering and by taking its time in lots of places so it can percolate out and feed. When it rushes through, it does not do that. So dynamic stability is the range of impact that river must have at any extreme time in order to function effectively. So the range of space that we need to function effectively and understanding those limits. You can think about that with temperature. You can think about that with all things. It really helps you get away from the mechanization, the manufacturing standards of everything being exact, which we never achieve, by the way. I'm a total quality person. I can tell you, you cannot be exactly the same all the time. It's not possible. There is nothing in this world that is exactly the same, back to diversity. And that range of normal, if we understood it, allows us to function so much more easily. We are able to work with that range instead of fight it, which is something we do. So here are 3 cards to think about what it means to be dynamically stable. The next value, ecologies. Oh my gosh. Ecologies are all about relationship. And they're all about time. You cannot make an ecology. An ecology creates itself. And it creates itself over time by determining the right relationships among all the parts and pieces. That's pretty awesome, actually. And it takes so long that it needs to be so respected. We want the biggest, the oldest trees, the oldest, largest salmon, and we're taking out of the ecology the wisdom that ecology has accrued. And we do great damage to it. It cannot be replaced. It has to be nurtured because it takes time. You are not born with wisdom. You gain it over time. Ecologies, incredible things. And so here are 3 cards to have you think much more deeply about ecologies. And then we come to the last intent, evolution. As we said, nothing stays the same. It always changes. And there comes a point when the changes either become something totally different, or it's really clear there has to be a jump, a shift, a movement into something really different. And that happens. We call it punctuated evolution. But evolution is learning. And as all the systems in a larger system learn, they come to agreement about doing something else, and we evolve. There are people who say that we are doing that now. Certainly, crisis stimulates new approaches to things, and therefore the potential for evolution. So here are 4 cards to think more deeply about what it means for evolution. to be an intent, to work with that process in excitement and joy. And here is the first value card, which is about co-creation. We can't evolve by ourselves. We evolve in community with others as we are making meaning, testing, experimenting together. That's when newness happens. I just heard a quote today, which I don't have enough memory on to refer you back to. I only can remember pieces and parts of it, so I'm not going to do damage to that. But I am going to say that there is a Native American wisdom that you need to dance with two things long enough to see the face of the third thing being born. And that's what co-creation is all about. So here are 3 cards to help you think more deeply about co-creation. The next value is agency. Now, I used to think about empowerment, but empowerment is an outside the system word. It really means I'm doing something to something else that gives it the ability to do something. And that's not true. We all have agency. Agency is inherent in being alive. We don't all use it, and we don't all use it well, and we can't really express our agency without partnership. So all of those things are things to think about when you're thinking about your own ability or anybody else's ability to take action, to do something. So here are 3 cards to think more deeply about agency. The next value is optimization. Optimization is an inside word. It really means we're making everything better. Not I'm the best, or this is the best, or the fastest, or the biggest. But whatever this is, it is optimizing the capacity of the system as a whole, and perhaps other systems as well. So optimization is a whole new way of thinking about evolving and becoming different and better. So here are 3 cards to think about more deeply: optimization. Then we come to the last card, the last value, which is experimentation. We do not give ourselves permission to play. Play is all about experimentation. That's all it is. You don't want to do the same things over and over. If you do the same things, you're doing them differently. There's always experimentation in play. That's what makes it fun and surprising and interesting and relevant and insightful and helps us learn. So experimentation is key. We worry so much about being right. We need to experiment. And so here are 3 cards to help you think more deeply about experimentation. I've also created a booklet that gives a little more depth to each card, and that will be seen as a face of other cards in the deck. So each card can have many faces. So there will be videos, other thoughts, other insights that I'm sharing as on a single card. Not every card has lots of them. They're very varied. But just so that you know that in Deckable, you will have access to what is really 2 decks, thinking about the values by which life makes life happen on the planet. So I hope that's been useful and interesting. I'm certainly going to be excited to tell you when they're released. We're hoping for a late July release, but it is, after all, technology and things happen. And as you go, you discover new things need to happen, and that's more work, and that changes the timeline. So we're hoping for July, but it could be August. We'll see. And I will certainly let you know precisely when that actually happens. But that's my sharing for today. I'd love to hear your comments on it. I just really would. So please put them in the box below and share with me what you're thinking about this, whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, or you have another idea that would fit with it. I am certainly open. So thank you so much for spending a little bit of time on this wonderfully warm and very summery Tuesday. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.